So today we're going to be reading from Daniel chapter 3, but we're going to be looking at a part of the story that I feel is often overlooked, a part of the story that's near the end and people just glance over it. Now, there's many different topics that you can focus on when reading the chapter of Daniel 3, but I'm going to focus on church and state. So go ahead and start reading in Daniel 3. So I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but we know that they build a statue and they want people to worship that statue. Now they play all the music, and I could do a whole video just on the music and the influence it has on people. But we're going to go to verse 6. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So right there we see the union of church and state starting to form. The king is forcing them to worship the way he wants them to worship. But this is not the part of the chapter that we're going to focus on today, because most Christians would agree that if the government tries to make us worship a false god, that we should refuse and be like the three men that went into the fire. Now let's go to verse 28, because this is the part of the chapter that I want to focus on. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word, and they yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God." Now you might say, what is wrong with that verse? That part is good. It is good that the king acknowledged the true God, that he acknowledged that he was wrong and that they should worship the one true God. But verse 29, "Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this." You see, that right there is the problem. You cannot force people to worship God. You cannot make a decree that people have to worship God, even if it is the true God, even if you're talking about the real God of the Bible. You cannot force people to worship God. Most people often overlook this part of the verse because they say Nebuchadnezzar turned to God, he worshiped God, acknowledged God, and they just think it's a good ending to the story. But you cannot make a decree on people to worship God, even if it is the true God. Let's read what the spirit of prophecy says about these verses. "In these and like words, the king of Babylon endeavored to spread abroad before all the people of earth his conviction that the power and authority of the God of the Hebrews was worthy of supreme adoration. And God was pleased with the effort of the king to show him reverence and make the royal confession of allegiance as widespread as was the Babylonian realm. It was right for the king to make public confession to seek to exalt the God of heaven above all other gods. But in endeavoring to force his subjects to make a similar confession of faith and to show similar reverence, Nebuchadnezzar was exceeding his right as a temporal sovereign. He has no more right, either civil or moral, to threaten man with death for not worshiping God. Then he had to make the decree co-signing to the flames all who refuse to worship the golden image. God never compels the obedience of man. He leaves all free to choose whom they will serve." We serve a God that gives us free will. We serve a God that wants us to love him by choice. He's not going to force us. So when the government steps in and tries to force people to worship God, even if it is the true God, that is committing adultery on God. The church is married to Christ. Like it says in Revelation 17, and I'll pull up the verse, the great harlot commits fornication with the kings of the earth, the government. Let's go to Revelation 17, and I'm going to skip a little bit. "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot." A woman is described as the church in Revelation. So this is the great harlot who sits on many waters. Waters is nations, tongues, and people. So that's the multitude. "With whom the kings of the earth," or the government, the kings, the rulers, "committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." It says it right there. The kings commit fornication with the great harlot. The government and the church mix. So we see it right there. Just like at the end of Daniel 3, when he issued the decree to worship the true God, it is still not right. And we see it in Revelation when it says that the harlot woman commits fornication with the kings of the earth. But how does that relate to us today? And obviously, we saw that in Revelation, it says that it's going to happen at the end times. And we're starting to see some of this stuff form right in front of our eyes. Something called Project 2025, and I've talked about it before. But they want to institute a fourth day of worship. And of course, when they say the Sabbath, they're not referring to Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. They're referring to Sunday, the false day of worship. Now, just like in Daniel 3, at the end of the chapter, Nebuchadnezzar had good intentions. He wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to worship the true God. But this is not the right way to go about it. Christian nationalism and Project 2025 and all this stuff rising, we need to remember as a church, as a people, we are married to Christ. When we go to the government for things like this, we are committing fornication. We're showing a lack of faith to God. And we have to remember this, and I'll end with this. We have to choose to worship God. God will not go to the government to force us to worship him. That is not the right way to go about things. God is a God of choice. God is a God of love, and we have to choose to love him.